The Ancient Gods Part 1 is the first of 2 single-player DLCs for Doom Eternal. It features new enemies, new maps, and a new story that takes place after the end of the main game. I reviewed Doom Eternal back when it came out, a link to my review in the description, so this video isn't going to be my usual review format since I would just be repeating 95% of what I said in my full review. This will just be a quick video on what you can expect from the Ancient Gods Part 1. This video will be story spoiler free, but I will be talking about new enemies, obstacles, and environments that the DLC has. So if you don't want to know anything about the DLC, you probably shouldn't watch this video. I played the Ancient Gods Part 1 on the Xbox One S for one playthrough on normal difficulty. The first thing you need to know about the Ancient Gods Part 1 is that id decided to ramp up the difficulty even more than they did in the main game. You will get your ass kicked in this DLC. I haven't played Doom Eternal since I put out my review, so even though I beat Eternal on Ultra Violence, I decided to play the DLC on normal because I had heard that it was more challenging, and I still had a difficult time with some encounters in the DLC. If you play this DLC on Nightmare, God help you. There are 3 new levels in the DLC. The UAC Atlantica facility, which is an ocean-based research platform, the Blood Swamps, which is obviously a swamp area in Hell, and the Holt, which is on the Maker homeworld. These maps hold up to anything in the main game and offer their own unique visuals and flavor that make them stand out. In particular, I really liked the UAC map as its cool color palette with the surrounding water and facility structure was like an inverse from the UAC facility on Mars from the first game. Mick Gordon has not returned to do the score for the Ancient Gods. Instead, we have Andrew Holsholt stepping in to give us new tracks. It's not an easy feat trying to live up to the very high standards that Mick set, but I think that Andrew does as good of a job as you could reasonably expect anyone to do. The music definitely fits in with the sound that Mick created for the new Doom games, even though I don't think it surpasses it. It's a good score, it's just not an amazing score like Eternal in 2016 had. There aren't any new weapons in the DLC, but there are 3 new runes, which have their own classification called support runes, of which you can equip one of along with your 3 other base runes. The DLC is around 5 hours long, which is about as long as I think it should be, and I enjoyed the brief opportunity to revisit one of the best games of the year. The Ancient Gods gives us a few new enemy types to deal with: turrets, spirits, invisible whiplashes, and blood makers. Turrets are glowing floating eyeballs that shoot projectiles at you from a stationary turret. If you keep your reticle on them for too long, they retreat into the turret and you have to wait a bit till they pop out again to damage them. Turrets are pretty easy to kill, but since I'm playing on console, they can be a little annoying to deal with a controller at times. Spectre Whiplashes are whiplashes, only invisible this time. They are as big of a pain in the ass as you think they are. Blood Makers are a new type of Maker enemy, which, just like the Maker drones, require a headshot to kill. They are protected by some sort of shield, and you can only kill them when the shield is gone. They also have an attack which slows you down, so I recommend prioritizing these guys in larger fights. Spirits are my favorite new enemy in the DLC. They have the same model as the summoners from Doom 2016, but they behave very differently. Spirits will possess demons, giving them a big boost to their speed, health, and damage. And they can possess any demon in the game. A possessed Hell Knight isn't so bad, but once you start fighting possessed cyber demons or a possessed marauder, well, good luck. To kill a spirit, you first need to kill the demon they are possessing, which will force them out of the demon and make them vulnerable for a short time. They can only be killed with the microwave beam mod for the plasma rifle, and you need to kill them quick, otherwise they will possess a new demon and you have to kill them again. The combat encounters in the DLC are much more intense than in the main game, which I think is due to a lot of arenas being simultaneously bigger yet more confined. The actual size of the arenas is increased in a lot of instances, but there are many more corridors that funnel the player around the map. So even though there are more ways to navigate around arenas, there are also more checkpoints where the enemy can overwhelm you. Enemies are also more plentiful than in the main game. In particular, I noticed a pretty big increase to the number of fodder demons during combat. And there's also a fight with 2 marauders at once. No big deal. The DLC has 2 new boss fights, one of which is alright, the other one is pretty cool and hard. The main game didn't really have much in the way of technical issues, so I was expecting the same to be true for the DLC. Unfortunately, I did have a few problems with that part of the game. There were a few times in the game where the frame rate noticeably dropped from the targeted 60 frames per second. I noticed it the most during the swamp level. It didn't interfere with the gameplay, it didn't go down to like 10 frames per second or anything, but it was definitely noticeable, which is something that very rarely happened in the main game. There was a cutscene where the audio was out of sync with the cinematic, and the game crashed on me once. The Ancient Gods isn't a broken, buggy mess, but it does seem like it could have used a little bit more time in the oven. The story of the ancient gods is pretty interesting if you're invested in the lore. The Slayer has to find the Seraphim and get his help to put an end to the forces of hell for good. We get introduced to a new human character that acts as our guiding voice this time around, and I found him to be an enjoyable addition. The DLC also confirms certain things that were heavily hinted at in the main game, and ends on a pretty interesting cliffhanger that has me wondering if there's even going to be another Doom game after the next part of the DLC comes out. All in all, The Ancient Gods Part 1 is a worthwhile addition to Doom Eternal, if you're up for the challenge. I am not kidding when I say that this DLC is much harder than the main game, so if you found Eternal to be a little too hectic or stressful at some points, I would recommend turning down the difficulty a little bit. But if you're a hardcore Doom fan who's been eagerly anticipating this DLC and are up for the challenge, I think you're gonna have a very good time. I'm going to give The Ancient Gods Part 1 an 8.5 out of 10.